The marble in the lobby still held the warmth of the late afternoon sun. Grant Mercer stepped through the revolving doors, the sound of polished shoes on polished stone echoing behind him like a second set of footsteps. He didn't notice her at first. His phone buzzed a reminder for a call he didn't want to make. His briefcase was heavier than usual, or maybe his chest was. That was often the case lately. It wasn't until he sat third chair from the fountain facing the glass wall overlooking the street that he noticed the child. She sat cross-legged by the column near the elevator, back straight, fingers busy with a square of napkin. A janitor's cart rested a few feet away. She was no older than 8, wearing a faded navy blazer, 2 sizes too large, its sleeves swallowing her wrists. Her hair was neatly tied back. Her shoes didn't match. She was folding the napkin carefully, creasing the soft paper into a triangle, then again shaping it with quiet precision. When she looked up, she didn't flinch. Her eyes were the color of morning pavement gray, but trying. Grant blinked. He meant to look away, but something in her stillness made his fingers go quiet on the screen. "My mom said not to bother anyone," the girl said softly, "but the floor is cold." He didn't know what made him stand. Maybe it was the silence that followed her voice, like something you're not supposed to interrupt. He approached her slowly, unsure what to say. "Would you like a chair?" She looked at the line of chairs behind him. "I'm not supposed to." "Supposed to?" She nodded. "Only the waiting people sit there. My mom says we're just in between." In between what? Her shifts, school, and going home. He opened his mouth, closed it. She offered the paper object to him, a crane perfectly folded. The wings fluttered slightly as she held it out with both hands. "It's not much," she said, "but sometimes they help." He took it. He hadn't seen anyone make a paper bird in 30 years. It weighed almost nothing, but something in his chest shifted like a stack of unopened letters leaning sideways. Behind them, a young woman in a navy vest, the front desk associate watched with cautious curiosity. Grant gave a faint nod to assure her everything was fine. She didn't move. The girl turned back to her spot and began folding a second napkin. "What's your name?" Grant asked, realizing too late he hadn't even introduced himself. She glanced up. "Amelia." He almost asked for her last name, but stopped. It wasn't necessary. Names like hers rarely made it to the email chains he signed off on anyway. A paper crane rested in his palm. Beside him, the receptionist tapped on a keyboard, arranging boardroom bookings. On the floor, Amelia was shaping wings. She wore a stained uniform shirt 2 sizes down from his custom-tailored one. He sat down beside her on the edge of the marble ledge. They didn't speak again for several minutes. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one. Inside, only the soft rustle of folding paper filled the lobby. And for the first time in years, he forgot where he was going. The next afternoon, Grant returned earlier than usual. He told himself it was coincidence, just a shift in his schedule, a canceled meeting. But as the glass doors parted and the cool air of the lobby wrapped around him, his eyes instinctively found the space near the elevator column. She was there again. Amelia, sitting in the same spot, blazer sleeves still too long, her back just as straight. This time she wasn't folding cranes. She was flipping through a book so worn it looked soft like cloth. Her knees were drawn close, balancing the pages, and her lips moved without sound, mouthing words she couldn't quite say aloud. Grant approached slowly, the leather strap of his briefcase digging into his palm. He cleared his throat. "Would you like something warm? Hot chocolate, maybe?" She looked up startled, but only slightly. "Thank you, but I'm okay. I already had half a sandwich." "Only half? My mom says it's better to save the other half for later, in case today isn't finished yet." He blinked. "You don't have to talk to me," she added gently. "I know how busy men are." The sentence cut deeper than it should have. The way she said it, not bitter, just factual, was like a blueprint she'd memorized, a reality etched into routine. He sat again. Not beside her this time, but at his usual chair, the third from the fountain. Close enough to speak if she wanted, far enough if she didn't. "I brought coffee," he said after a minute. "Black, no sugar." She smiled politely. "My mom says coffee makes you older, faster." A quiet chuckle escaped him, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your mom might be right." He placed the cup on the marble ledge between them. She didn't touch it. The receptionist glanced up again. This time, she didn't hide her confusion. Grant Mercer, CEO of one of the most aggressive acquisition firms on the West Coast, was spending his afternoon in the lobby with a child. He watched as Amelia resumed her reading finger, tracing each word carefully. Her lips moved with effort, stopping at the longer ones. She frowned, then tried again. "Do you like that book?" She nodded. It's about a girl who builds a house out of broken things. That sounds complicated. No, she said, folding the corner of the page. You just have to know which pieces still fit. He glanced at the coffee still steaming. She looked up through the same glass ceiling her mother scrubbed daily. When the elevator chimed behind them, she stiffened. That's probably my mom. I have to get ready. Of course. Amelia stood and brushed off her skirt. She tucked the book into a thin plastic bag that was knotted on one handle, the kind that used to carry groceries, now a backpack. Will you be here tomorrow? He asked, without meaning to. She paused. I'm always here, after school, until the mop cart comes back. The elevator opened. A woman in navy slacks stepped out, hair tied back, pushing a fresh cart of supplies. She looked tired, but when her eyes found Amelia, they brightened just a little. The girl waved but didn't run. Bye, she said simply. And then she was gone. He suddenly wished he had something warmer to offer. Grant stared at the cup between them, still full, cooling slowly. She hadn't taken a sip. She spoke with grace. He answered with money and missed birthdays. The crane from the previous day was still in his jacket pocket, slightly crumpled now. He reached in, unfolded it halfway, then paused. Across the lobby, the janitor's cart creaked once, then disappeared around the corner. And for the second evening in a row, he forgot what meeting he was late for. Grant didn't usually speak to staff. He noticed them. Of course, he wasn't that far gone, but noticing was not the same as knowing. Names were abstract, faces blurred with badges and uniforms and service smiles. But when he arrived the next evening, he waited near the reception desk instead of heading upstairs. No briefcase, no urgency. Just his phone, a folded crane in his coat pocket, and a cup of hot chocolate he'd had the barista wrap carefully in a cardboard sleeve. He spotted her again. Amelia. This time she was kneeling near the base of the elevator arms, elbow deep in a pile of white napkins, counting them, then folding them into stacks of 10. What are you doing? She looked up and smiled, a little embarrassed. Helping. Helping who? My mom. She says it's not allowed, but I do it anyway. That way we get to go home faster. He stepped closer. You're not supposed to be working. I'm not, she insisted. I'm just folding. She stood and brushed her hands on her skirt, then accepted the cup he held out. It's not coffee, right? Hot chocolate, promise. She took it with both hands and exhaled. It smells like stories. He raised an eyebrow. That's a new one. My teacher says books smell like chocolate. I think chocolate smells like books. She spoke like someone who'd never been told her thoughts were strange. Does your mom work here? He asked gently. She nodded. Yes, she's the night crew. Doesn't that mean you go home late? I wait here, then we go together. It's okay. Sometimes the chairs are soft, and there's a heater in the bathroom. A quiet pause settled between them, one that felt far too large for her age. What about school? She shrugged. I try not to fall asleep. My teacher doesn't notice when I sit in the back. She looked up at him with the quiet resilience of someone who had learned not to ask for more. He sat beside her again. No meetings this time, no excuse. Just silence and the weight of her words. Do you do this every day? Only on weekdays. And no one's told you to stop. Sometimes security does, but when I say my mom's name, they let me stay. We're not in the way. Her voice was matter of fact, practiced. He realized she must have explained herself 100 times before, to guards, to teachers, to well-meaning strangers who didn't stay long enough to care. She sipped, her hot chocolate eyes fluttering shut for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue. This is for you, she said, offering it with both hands. He hesitated, then unfolded the tissue. Another crane, this one made of actual paper, not napkin. It was lined notebook paper written on one side in small pencil script, Amelia 3rd grade. Book list, due Monday. I didn't need that side anymore, she said. I finished it already. He traced the folds with his thumb. It was sturdy, practiced, perfect. He remembered his daughter once making the same thing from a page torn out of his planner. You're very good at these. I make them for the cleaners, one for each floor. My mom says they throw them away, but I think some keep them. Everyone needs something small. She said it with the wisdom of someone who had made peace with the size of her gifts. The elevator dinged. He turned to see her mother again, taller than he'd expected, with strong arms and a slow, quiet step. She didn't speak as she approached, only glanced at Amelia with a kind of grateful fatigue. Amelia stood. I'll be over there folding, she said quickly, then scurried a few feet away, giving them space. Grant rose. Your daughter, she's something. The woman gave a polite, measured smile. She has a lot of me in her, and a lot I wish I had. He hesitated, then extended his hand. Grant Mercer. She blinked. Recognition registered slowly. "Oh, I didn't, Mr. Mercer. I thought you—" She stopped herself. "I'm Rosa." "Rosa," he repeated. "It's good to meet you." She glanced over her shoulder. "I hope she's not in trouble." "No," he said softly. "She's folding cranes." Rosa looked down at her gloves, worn and stained. "She thinks they make things better." "They do," he said, surprising even himself. "She handed me one once when I was sick, said it had 100 good wishes folded inside." He looked over. Amelia had set a new crane on the heater vent. She stood in front of the air like it might lift the paper into flight. When Rosa returned to work, Amelia came back and sat down beside him without a word. She pulled a second sheet of paper from her bag and began to fold. "Does your daughter like stories?" he asked. "She likes pages that feel used." She nodded. "My mom says I can't go up there. That floor's for people who matter." He said nothing for a long while. Eventually, she placed the new crane next to his cup. 2 of them now. Folded wings, silent things. The next morning, Grant woke before the sun. It wasn't restlessness. It was something else, something quieter, more persistent. He tried to shake it off with black coffee and the financial pages. But headlines couldn't hold him. Mergers, percentages, global equity, all meaningless when the image of 2 paper cranes stared back from the marble of his mind. By noon, he resolved not to go downstairs. He had meetings, deadlines, a budget revision for Q4. Besides, it wasn't his job to care. He made it to 4 p.m. Then he closed his laptop, gathered his coat, and told his assistant to cancel his next call. Again. In the lobby, the receptionist glanced up with thinly veiled curiosity. He didn't acknowledge it. He didn't need to. But Amelia wasn't there. The marble near the column was empty. No child, no cranes. Just a janitor's cart parked awkwardly mop askew. He sat in the 3rd chair by the fountain anyway. Maybe she wasn't coming today. Maybe that was better. After 10 minutes, he stood to leave. A part of him felt embarrassed, like he'd been caught caring too long about something that wasn't his to carry. That's when he heard the voice behind him. "Sir, your folder was falling." He turned. Amelia stood holding a thick manila folder in both arms, cradling it like something sacred. It must have slipped from his briefcase. He stepped toward her. "You picked this up?" "It almost slid into the water," she said simply. "I didn't want your papers to get wet." He accepted it from her small hands. "Thank you." She nodded, then looked away. Her hands brushed her skirt, uncertain. "I wasn't going to come today," she added, "but I left something." She pulled a crane from her pocket, creased but intact. "I forgot to give you this one. It's from a page my mom wrote on, a list of things she wanted to buy if the coupons worked." He blinked. "You forgot your papers." They were sliding off. He had nothing to say to that. Not really. He looked down at the folder, his quarterly projections, market analysis, legal reviews. Pages worth millions. And none of it felt heavier than the crumpled paper bird she had tucked in beside it. For a moment, he hated how polite she was. She sat cross-legged near the heater vent again. Same spot, same posture. She didn't ask for anything. Not warmth, not food, not attention. And still she offered more than most adults had ever managed to. She wore obligation like a second skin and kindness like a reflex. Across the lobby, a security guard eyed them. Grant nodded to signal it was fine. He sat again more carefully this time. Amelia reached into her grocery bag and pulled out her worn book. "Do you want to hear what happened to the girl with the house?" He hesitated. "I only read the good parts," she added quickly. "Mom says not everyone wants the whole story." He gave a short breath through his nose. It almost passed for a laugh. "Tell me the good parts." She opened to a page held with scotch tape. She found a window in the scrapyard and cleaned it so she could look at the sky while she worked. Grant folded his arms, eyes on the marble. "That's a good part." She nodded. The window wasn't really hers, though. Someone else used it later. But she liked knowing it had seen her. Something settled in his throat. A weight. A mirror. He took out the crane she had given him and placed it beside the other 2 on the armrest. The 3 sat in a row, like little sentinels. The wings were crooked, but they faced forward. She looked up at him. "Do you know how to fold them now?" He shook his head. "Still learning." Amelia's eyes softened. "That's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try." He signed off on things every day. Approvals, terminations, strategies. But not one of them had ever sounded like permission to try. Her mother arrived minutes later, hair damp from rushing face, flushed with concern. She mouthed an apology to Grant, then ushered Amelia over. Amelia didn't wave goodbye this time. But as she passed, she placed one last crane on the chair he'd occupied. This one was made from a torn magazine cover. Its wings shimmered under the lobby lights. He took the folder back, tucked the cranes inside, and walked away. But not quickly. That night, the briefcase sat unopened on Grant Mercer's desk. Instead of spreadsheets or earnings forecasts, he poured himself a small glass of scotch he didn't finish, and stared at the 3 folded cranes laid out like artifacts on the kitchen counter. The last one, the shimmering crane made from the torn magazine cover, reflected the under-cabinet lights like stained glass. He wasn't sure why he hadn't thrown them out. It would have been easy. Easier than this quiet pull in his chest. After midnight, when the city had gone still, and the only sound was the tick of the wall clock, he reached for the oldest briefcase he still owned, the one he hadn't touched since the funeral. Inside, everything was exactly as he'd left it, a small box of colored pencils, a music recital program with her name printed in uneven ink, and a crumpled, faded paper crane. He held it delicately. It was smaller than Amelia's, sloppier too, folded by a child's hand, his daughter's. He hadn't touched it in over 10 years. It was hers, her last gift to him before the accident. He had shoved it into the side pocket of his briefcase and forgotten on purpose, maybe. And now, holding Amelia's cranes beside it, something inside him cracked open. She'd folded hers the same way, small creases, careful corners, not too tight. Like they were meant to breathe. He sat down at the table, pulled out a blank sheet of printer paper, and began folding. His fingers were stiff. Slower than he remembered. The paper buckled in odd places, corners refused to meet. But he kept going, smoothing the lines, undoing mistakes, trying again. It wasn't perfect, but when he finished it stood. Crooked wings, uneven folds. Still it stood. He hadn't opened that side pocket since his daughter passed. The next morning he arrived in the lobby earlier than usual, a paper crane in his coat pocket his own. Amelia was already there. She had a napkin and a crayon sketching tiny trees on the wings of her newest creation. "You're early," he said. "I wanted to see if the heater still works." "Does it?" "Sometimes." She placed her new crane on the vent. It fluttered, but didn't take flight. "I made one," he said. She looked up. For real, her voice was cautious, hopeful. He reached into his coat and handed it to her. She examined it like a museum piece, then gently adjusted the wings. "It's a little lopsided." "I know, but it's good. You folded it yourself." "I did." She smiled. "Then it's perfect." She pulled out her notebook, lined the corners, curled from use, and began drawing something with the tip of her crayon. He watched, curious. "What are you drawing?" "A window." "Why a window?" She didn't look up. "Because even if people can't leave, they should still get to see outside." Grant sat beside her. "That girl in the book, you said she had a window." Amelia nodded. She cleaned it every day, even when she had nothing else, because it made her feel like someone might look in one day and see her. He closed his eyes briefly. His daughter had once said the same thing about the skylight in her hospital room. She used to lie there and say, "Maybe someone is watching from above, but I'm okay with that, as long as they don't forget me." He flew to Zurich for therapy. Amelia had no ride home. "Amelia," he said quietly, "do you ever want to go upstairs?" She blinked. "To the top floor." He nodded. "I don't know. Mom says it's not our place." "What if it was?" She tilted her head, unsure. "Are you allowed to say that?" "I'm the CEO," he said. "I think I can say that." She didn't smile, but her fingers fidgeted with the paper crane, gently lifting and lowering the wings. "I think I'd like to go up just once, not to stay, just to see. Then we'll go." She looked down at her lap, then whispered, "I should ask my mom first." He nodded. Of course. He didn't press it. He didn't need to. She placed his crane next to hers, crooked wings facing crooked wings. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man running a company. He felt like someone folding a beginning. The elevator dinged as the sun dipped low across the city skyline. Golden light spilled through the glass facade of the lobby, catching dust in slow, sparkling swirls. Grant stood beside Amelia, not in front of her, not leading, just waiting. She held tightly to her mother's hand, her eyes darting from the numbers on the panel to the corners of the elevator, like they might disappear if she stared too long. The ride to the top floor was silent. When the doors opened, Amelia took a hesitant step forward. The executive level was hushed, carpeted gleaming. Desks lined the hallway like quiet sentinels. The lighting was soft, the windows impossibly tall. "This is where you work?" she asked, almost whispering. Grant nodded. Amelia walked slowly, her fingers trailing the wall, as if touching it might prove it real. "It doesn't smell like anything." He smiled gently. "That's intentional." They reached his office. He pushed the door open and let her step inside first. She paused at the threshold. "This is yours." All of it, he said. Every inch of wood and glass and silence. She crossed to the window. It looks fake, like the city is behind glass in a museum. He stepped beside her, letting her take it in. The skyline shimmered under the setting sun. What do you see? She pointed. That tall red building. It's near the park. My school's a few blocks from there. You can see your school from here. I think so. I didn't know places like this could see places like mine. Her voice was quiet, her face unreadable. She spoke with the reverence of someone allowed inside a world they were never meant to enter. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a paper crane, her first one now slightly smudged at the edges. He placed it on the windowsill. I kept this one. She turned surprised. You did? Every day, he said, right there. Her eyes searched his like she was trying to find the part of him that would make a joke or back away. But he didn't. Instead, he walked to the small side table and returned with something unexpected, a blank sheet of paper. He sat on the carpet. Want to show me how to fold again? She stared. On the floor, she asked, giggling a little. It's where all the best lessons start. She joined him cross-legged in her usual style and began folding. This one's for your desk, she said. You shouldn't have just one. They worked in silence. His fingers moved clumsily, but hers were sure, gentle, patient. You fold the wings last, she reminded him, so they remember how to fly. He'd spent years running empires, but never learned how to fold wings. Outside, the sun dipped below the high-rises. Shadows stretched long across the carpet. Amelia looked around again. Where do people sit in here? He gestured to the long leather chairs in the corner. They don't look comfortable. They're not. Why do you have them? I think they're meant to impress people, or intimidate them, I forget which. She returned her gaze to the window. You should get a different chair. He tilted his head. What kind? One that lets you see out, but also has space for paper cranes. She smiled, then stood. Can I leave one here? Anywhere you like. She placed hers next to his on the windowsill. They faced different directions. They're talking to each other, she said. Behind them, Rosa stood in the doorway. She had been silent the whole time, watching. She didn't want this to feel like charity, Grant said to her quietly. Rosa nodded. It doesn't. She spoke like someone who had cleaned glass for years, but had never seen through it until now. Thank you, she said, barely audible. I should be thanking you. He stood brushing off his trousers, still holding his crooked crane. Later that night, long after they left, he stayed in the office with the lights low, tracing the folded wings on the windowsill with his finger. They faced the city. Not away from it, toward it. The following evening, Grant returned to the lobby with a folded paper in his coat pocket and a quiet determination pressed between his ribs. But Amelia wasn't there. Not by the heater, not folding napkins or tracing birds onto napkin backs. Rosa was, though. She stood behind the janitor's cart wringing out a mop. Her uniform sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, and her eyes moved fast, focused but weary. She didn't look up when he approached. Is Amelia okay? He asked gently. Rosa froze for just a moment. Then she resumed mopping. She's fine. She didn't come today. She's with my sister. I asked her to stay away for a while. He waited. The silence stretched like a bridge between them. I think she's gotten too close, Rosa added. Grant took a slow breath. Close to what? To things that don't belong to us. He swallowed his response. Rosa straightened and met his eyes. I'm not ungrateful, but I know what this looks like. What does it look like? That she's a story, and we're the heartwarming moment in someone else's life. She has a name, he said softly. And a mother, Rosa replied. He nodded, stepping back. I never meant to cross that line. She sighed. Mr. Mercer, you're a kind man, I believe that. But I also believe kindness can break people when it comes and goes without warning. She held her mop like a shield, not a tool. Grant looked down at the marble, the same floor Amelia had once called cold. She said something the first time we met, he murmured. I just want something warm for my sister. Rosa's expression cracked just slightly. She says things like that. She said, her voice lower now. She watches people, understands too much. I worry she folds her hurt into those little cranes and thinks it'll fly away. He said nothing for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and handed her the folded sheet of paper he'd brought down. It wasn't a crane. It was a drawing. 2 chairs. One small wooden hand drawn with curved arms. The other, taller, plainer. They were side by side facing a window. I was thinking of having this made for the lobby, he said. Nothing fancy, just a place to wait, together. Rosa looked down at the paper, her hands softening. There wouldn't be a plaque, he added, or a photo, or any attention. Her fingers brushed the edge of the sketch. Just space. For someone who matters. She looked at the drawing like it was the first time someone had saved her a seat. "She says you remind her of someone," Rosa said quietly. "Who?" "My father. He used to tell her stories before he passed. He folded cranes too." He smiled faintly. "She's got his hands then." Rosa gave a small nod, then folded the sketch and tucked it into her cart's side pouch. "I'll bring her tomorrow," she said, "if she wants to come." "I'll be here," he said, "whether she comes or not." He turned to leave his footsteps softer than usual. She watched him go, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel smaller than the building she cleaned. That night, Amelia left a single paper crane on the heater vent. After hours, its wings spread wider than usual, like it had something to say. Inside its folded belly was a scribbled note. "I'm sorry if I flew too close." He remembered a time when someone said the same thing to him, and he'd let them drift away. This time he wouldn't. When Amelia returned the next evening, she didn't carry her notebook, or her bag of cranes, or even the oversized blazer. She wore a plain sweater, her hair loose for the first time, and her steps slow, as if unsure whether she'd be welcomed or turned away. Grant was already there, not seated in the third chair by the fountain, but crouched low beside the heater vent, adjusting something carefully. She stopped halfway across the lobby. On the marble where she had once perched cross-legged was a chair. A small wooden chair built simply, its back carved gently in a curve, the arms polished but not lacquered. Tucked beneath the seat, so discreet it could be missed, were 4 small letters burned into the underside of the frame, EML, her initials. The chair wasn't new. It had scratches, a worn leg, a history. But it was real, and it was waiting. Grant stood as she approached, brushing sawdust from his palms. "I had it brought in early," he said, "before I lost my nerve." She didn't speak. Her fingers ran along the seat's edge. "I thought you might like a place of your own," he added. "Just somewhere to sit, not borrowed, not temporary." "It's just a chair," she whispered. He smiled. "Maybe, but you're the only one who fits in it." She turned and sat, slowly, carefully, then looked up at him. "I feel taller in it." That sentence, delivered so quietly, it barely rose above the hum of the heater, landed in his chest like a stone in still water. He hadn't given anyone a place in years. A moment later, she pulled a folded piece of colored paper from her sweater pocket. The fold was neater than ever, sharp corners, precise wings. "This one's for the chair," she said. "It can keep watch when I'm not here." She placed the crane on the armrest, its wings angled forward as if ready to fly. Across the lobby, the receptionist watched with wide eyes. The security guard who once told Amelia to move now stood perfectly still. No one dared interrupt. Grant crouched beside her again. "You know, I was thinking," he said, voice low. "Maybe this chair doesn't have to stay in the corner." She tilted her head. "It could go by the window." She smiled slightly. "That way the cranes can look out, and so can you." He didn't move it, not yet, not without asking. But when Rosa entered moments later, she stopped short. Her eyes found the chair, the crane her daughter. Amelia looked up. "He made it for me." Rosa swallowed. Her voice caught. "I see that." There was nothing else to say. She stood near the mop cart with her hands folded, unsure whether to cry or sit beside her daughter. In the end, she just nodded. Amelia opened her palm and offered the last piece. A drawing crayon on paper. A girl standing beside a large man, both holding paper cranes. Behind them, a window stretched tall. Above the drawing, in crooked capital letters, Mr. G and me. Grant's throat tightened. He took it with both hands. "I'll put it somewhere safe," he said. "No," she replied. "You have to hang it." He laughed. Quiet, honest. "I will." He stood and extended a hand, not for a shake, but for balance as she stepped down from her chair. She took it. She spoke like someone who'd never been invited but knew how to accept a gift. That evening, after the lobby emptied and lights dimmed, the small wooden chair remained. On its armrest, a single crane. On the marble below, it faint chalk marks drawn like stepping stones leading nowhere, or somewhere unseen. A week passed. The chair stayed. It was never moved, never questioned, never removed from its spot beside the tall window. Every morning, the janitorial team wiped its arms carefully. Every evening, a new crane would appear on the seat, each one different. Some made from napkins, others from notebook pages, magazines, even a receipt or two. No one asked where they came from. And every day the receptionist would glance at the little wooden chair before unlocking the doors, as if waiting to see if a child would appear beside it once more. She always did. Amelia came in after school as usual, her bag bouncing softly against her side. But now, when she walked through the lobby, no one stopped her. She no longer hovered by the elevator column or perched near the heater vent. She went straight to her chair. Sometimes she read, sometimes she just sat, and sometimes, when no one was watching, she folded her cranes on the seat's edge carefully, deliberately, and whispered something to them before setting them down. She moved like the chair was her station, and her cranes were letters the world hadn't opened yet. On a Thursday afternoon, a courier arrived, not with packages but with envelopes. Inside, the largest was a printed invitation with gold-embossed trim. Mercer Foundation Youth Opportunity Program Inaugural Event, featuring community scholar Amelia Lopez. Her name, on an invitation. Grant stood nearby as Rosa read the words silently, her hand pressed over her mouth. "You don't have to say anything," he told her. "You just need to come. Bring Amelia. Bring anyone." Rosa looked at him. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." "Then why?" He glanced over at the chair, now empty for the moment. A single blue crane rested on the cushion. "Because no one ever gave me a seat when I was her age," he said, "and I never forgot that." She looked at the man who owned the building and saw the boy who didn't own a desk. The event was modest, no photographers, no flashing lights, just staff families, a few teachers, and a podium made from unfinished oak. Amelia stood behind it, her hands just barely reaching the microphone. She wore a simple white dress with a paper crane embroidered near the hem. Her voice trembled when she began, but steadied quickly. "My mom works in this building, and I wait for her most days. A while ago, I used to wait on the floor. But then someone gave me a chair. That chair didn't make me rich or famous or taller, but it made me feel like I wasn't invisible." She paused. "And when people see you, they treat you like you're real." In the audience, Grant pressed his thumb against the inside of his wrist to keep from blinking too fast. She stood in front of executives, not to beg but to speak. The scholarship was real, quietly funded, no interviews, no strings. More chairs were being made, each one hand-carved, marked with initials under the seat. Not just for Amelia, but for others. Quiet places to wait, to be seen. That night after the event, Amelia handed him one last crane. It was red, made from heavy stock paper. Its wings were crisp, its head slightly turned. "This one's for your shelf," she said. "Why the shelf?" "So you don't forget what your window looks like." He knelt, so they were eye level. "I won't forget. I want to be someone who gives chairs to others," she added. "You already are." She smiled like she believed it. Back in his office, Grant placed the crane on the same shelf as the first one she gave him. Behind it, he tacked up the drawing, Mr. G and me, framed in quiet honor. Below it, a small plaque, not engraved but handwritten. "Keep folding." The cranes faced the city again, but now he realized they weren't looking for escape. They were waiting for someone to notice. Spring came slowly to the city. In the mornings, soft light pooled over the marble floors of the lobby before the suits arrived. The receptionist unlocked the glass doors each day with the same quiet ritual, turning the key, straightening the sign, and pausing, always pausing, to glance at the small wooden chair by the window. Some days it was empty, but never for long. Even when Amelia wasn't there, the chair was never truly vacant. A new crane would arrive, folded with care, perched on the seat like a sentinel. Sometimes blue, sometimes gold, sometimes made from the corner of a worksheet or the back of a menu. They never stopped. That morning, the crane was white, plain printer paper, folded so precisely that its wings cast twin shadows in the early light. Grant stepped into the lobby with his coffee slower than usual. His gait had softened these past months. There was less hurry in his stride, more purpose in his pauses. He stopped beside the chair. There was a note tucked under the crane's wing. It read, "Mr. G, I won't be here this week. My mom got daytime hours. We can walk home together now. Thank you for my seat. I still fold wings. I hope you still try." He sat, not in his usual third chair by the fountain, not across the lobby in the polished executive wing, but in her chair. His knees folded awkwardly, but he didn't adjust. He just sat, still, and for the first time he noticed how quiet the lobby was at that hour, how the birds outside flickered across the glass, and how the world looked a little different from a seat that low to the ground. He placed the note in his coat pocket and set the white crane gently in his open palm. Across the room, a junior associate passed by, puzzled at the sight of the CEO hunched in a child-sized chair, staring out at the city like he was waiting for something. But Grant didn't move, not for a long time. He sat down just once and felt taller than he ever had in a boardroom. Later that week, a new drawing appeared tacked to the wall behind the receptionist's desk. No one knew who put it there, but no one took it down. It was simple, a window drawn in crayon open to a paper sky. Two cranes floated across it, one red, one white, The marble lobby echoed less now. Or maybe he just listened better. The first crane he ever received still sat on his shelf, slightly torn, never discarded.